So, welcome, Smruti. Just before we get started, if you can give your introduction, that would help our viewers who have joined already, and then we will take it from there.
Yes, thank you so much, Hamish, and thank you for inviting me here. Uh, I would like to, the introduction you gave for me was actually perfect. And I would just like to add to that that it's whatever you do, it's quite a journey. Even deciding what is it that you really wish to do and what really fascinates you and excites you in terms of your profession. So I hope that my journey so far will be able to sort of help other young people who are at the junction where I was exactly 10 years ago today, and any guidance and any help that I can provide them, that'll be my pleasure.
Just tell us about your career journey, how you became practicing, particularly in social emotional learning, which is again very new word for many of our viewers. So, if you can brief them about what does that mean, along with giving them an like how you transitioned from being an engineer to a practicing person, particularly in social emotional learning. So, yeah, please.
Great, sure. So my story and my journey, I will try to sort of highlight a few key aspects of my journey, professional journey so far. So when um, I was in my fourth year in IIT Bombay, I actually took up a course on educational technology. And by that time, in my college, I wasn't uh, really able to connect with what I was studying at the moment, which was my major, energy engineering. And I happened to attend this seminar by Professor Eric Mazur, who teaches physics at Harvard University. And I remember his way of teaching is something that he's come up with, which is called peer instruction. And when I came out of that seminar, I was never the same again. The way he was teaching, he actually had a room full of 200 IIT Bombay students on their toes on a simple question of buoyancy. And I had not felt so alive in any other classroom in my entire life. uh, that made me realize that it's possible to teach students in a way where we can really make them curious, actively involve them in the thinking process, and while making them conceptually stronger and making them fall in love with the subject. So that was actually one of the points where I transitioned to education as a field in general. And eventually, I started to sort of question what education should really even mean. So I graduated from one of the top engineering colleges in the country, but I still lacked some of the basic soft skills, as we call them. And I was still sort of struggling to learn these soft skills. For example, if you would have asked me to do this webinar 5 years ago, I would have ran for my life. So speaking actually was one of the skills, like communication skills, that I absolutely struggled with. And there are so many different aspects of even our social and emotional aspects, which not only influence our personal lives, but they also affect our professional lives. So as and when I began learning these skills myself, I came to know that there is actually a field which studies all of these things in detail. So things like when we say social and emotional learning, it's actually a very very broad term that actually means how can you control your emotions to uh, apply it to anything. So, for example, you can actually apply it to uh, achieve your goals. You can actually use your emotions to manage yourself better, and so on. Go on to manage your time better. You can communicate with others. You can build good and deep positive relationships with people, and so on and so forth. So I really got interested in this field, and I researched in this field where I was looking at assessments on SEL, and eventually I finally sort of had the courage to start a non-profit by myself, which I am actually heading now for the past 1 year. So yeah, that's
Great. So
short version of my story. Yeah.
great. So it looks like you got your calling when you attended that seminar. You started exploring education field and started exploring soft skills and how you can go deeper. Then you found out social emotional learning, and then you went like into the details. You started thinking how you can make a difference at the large scale, and then you started your non-profit. So today there are students, teachers, as well as parents who are watching us live. They have this and because of the situation of COVID-19, everybody is locked down, everybody is at home. They are trying to understand what they can do. So what are your views how they can keep themselves mentally fit, emotionally sound, mindful of the fact that whatever is happening around them, they don't get scared, they feel more rejuvenated after the lockdown is over? Any suggestions for them? Any things that they can do as an expert?
Uh, sure. Off the top of my head, I would like to cover 2 points over here. So, one is that of how you can sort of look at this entire scenario as a chance to really even relax, and secondly, learn whatever it is that you'd like. So, that is basically the first thing that we'll talk about is a mindset shift. So let me elaborate on that first. Uh, when after I gave my JE, I went straight to college. Vacations, we used to sort of get a lot of time to relax even during the vacations. And after let's say after the 5 years of my degree, I went on to my first job without more than a break of 1 week or so. Then when I switched to my second job profile, once again I only had like 2 weeks where I got some break, and after that I finally took some break for about 6 months before I started working on my non-profit. Even during these 6 months, I was always working on something or the other, as I had taken up extra projects. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that once, like after a certain age, I would say after the age of 13 or 14, we never ever get the chance to even sit back and reflect or get a time, the kind of time that we are getting right now. So you will never get this kind of a window in your life ever. The time where you can really spend time with your family, some
Great.
time, yeah, a break where you can really think about what is it that you want. Time where you can really look at even common skills, for example, which are common across all career streams, and even build those skills if you want to. So that is one mindset shift, which if we sort of look at this situation in that way, so we actually have ample time on our hands, which otherwise, when life gets in the way, we do not get that kind of time ever, if at all, till our retirement. So that is the first point. The second point is, in order to build that emotional resilience, or we can call it emotional toughness, to deal with a situation like this, the first thing that we should do is identify what is it that we can control and what is it that we cannot control. So let's say if I have given my board examination and I'm waiting for the results, that is something that is out of my control. So what I can do is I can only hope for the best. But life is a marathon. What I can do is I can look up and research the courses that I want to do. I can actually look up and research the kind of um, options that I would have. I can actually sort of brush up my old hobbies if I want. Because when, let's say, if I'm talking about children who've just given their 12th board examinations, when you go on to your colleges, you will realize the importance of the extracurricular activities and leadership roles as well. If you have identified your weaknesses, that is something that you can also start working upon. So yeah, the two things would be, one is a mindset shift and look at this time as an opportunity rather than a crisis. And second would be to build emotional resilience or emotional toughness by identifying what you can and cannot control.
Great. So that really I think is very good suggestions and very practical way to think about the situation. So like one is like mindset shift, really taking yourself to in that position where you can utilize your time. Second, once you take that mindset shift, you want to really explore and think about what can be controlled and what cannot, so that you start doing and start doing which is under your control, right? So that's very very important for all our students there. Great. So like the situation is very tough as you explained, right? As everybody's kind of don't know what is the future. Like you said, right, 10th standard student, they are waiting for their results. They don't know when the classes are going to start. They don't know when they are going to go to schools, when are they going to meet their friends, how how they can really think about the next steps in their life, right? So what are your views of what you can tell them, so that let's say they have shifted their mind now, they know what is under their control, what kind of skills, like we did touch upon communication skills and leadership. So apart from that, what other angles they can think in order to utilize their time?
Okay, so I will try to touch upon three areas in uh, response to this question. So the first area and the I think the most talked about, but still the most underrated things would be of time management. Wherever you go, whatever you do, in whatever career or jobs you are, that is also one of the things that I struggled with a lot. Let's say when you talk about even time management, it's nothing but managing yourself. And let's say if right now I know that I need to study or I need to work on a project, but instead I feel like playing something on my phone, or I feel like just browsing social media. So that is something that we can actually start working on in this time, where there are not many other variables that will sort of determine how you use your time, except for yourself and your mind and your thoughts. So that is the first thing that we can do. And if you want, I can sort of talk about that for a few minutes before I move to the next point. Sure. So the first thing that we should be doing when we talk about managing our time well is have a rough idea about our daily routines and what we want to sort of put in our whole day. And this of course has to be a very very balanced mix of things, rather than saying that, okay, I will wake up at 6 a.m. and I will study till 10 a.m. before I go to sleep, which is not practical. So it should have a balance of your whatever work that you're putting in towards your goals. It should include things that you really like and look forward to. It should include some fun time. It should also include some time to connect with your friends and family, because that is also, let's face it, that is very, very important, and the best time to do that. And so on and so forth. uh, the second thing that we should be doing when it comes to time management is actually having small and short goals, so that when you put in sort of design this routine, you don't fall off track. So when we design these small goals, you're able to see that, okay, I am able to complete or finish these tasks in, let's say, half an hour or 1 hour, and that will keep you motivated to sort of stick to your routine and stick to your timetables. And the third thing that I say when we talk about time management is that not all days are same. There are days when you feel really enthusiastic to do something, but there are days when we lack the even the basic thing or the basic motivation to do something. So the third thing when it comes to time management is, if you go off track, don't be harsh to yourself, but try to be calm and try to be kind to yourself, even if you go off track. And rather than throwing out the entire routine out of the window, try to get back on track and try to revise and relook at a few things by being kind to yourself. So these are some things that you can do to manage your time well. The second thing that I want to sort of touch upon is,
Great, great.
thank you. The second thing that I'd like to talk about is um, something that is actually coming up and gaining a lot of traction uh, and a lot of attention is emotional intelligence. So this is something that is actually is people all across the world, uh, employers, they actually, when they assess you, even when you go for a job interview, they actually also assess for emotional intelligence. So what we mean by emotional intelligence in the context of professional life is, how well can you handle stress. So the current situation that we are in is the best example, and it's the best test of how well we handle ourselves in stressful situations. So, how well do you get along with people? How are you able to understand what the other person is feeling, and sort of be sensitive towards the other person's feelings? So these are some of the things that we mean when we say emotional intelligence, and that is actually something that people also write on their LinkedIn pages these days. That skills emotional intelligence, right?
Right,
So
right.
that is something that if you haven't heard of it so far, something worth looking up and something worth actually developing. And the third thing,
Excellent.
actually, I would say is, and it's something that we all must do, is actually pick up a hobby and go the extra mile to really be good at that thing. So let's say if I used to play badminton and volleyball back in college, but I wasn't very good at it. So let's say, uh, but let's talk about indoor games or things that you can do inside your home. Let's say if it's music, arts, or dance, or any of those things, pick up a hobby and try to go the extra mile to become good at what you do. What will happen here is you'll actually learn how to learn new things. So when you sort of challenge yourself even in the thing that you love the most, you can learn how to overcome the challenges when you learn something new, and you'll actually practice learning and mastering something new, which is actually, again, right now is the best time to do that. So yeah, those would be my
Great. Great. So all the 3 points makes very logical sense. Like you need to manage your time. Like we have been locked down since almost 20, 30 days now, and more 20 days to go. And then second, social, emotionally balancing yourself with the term that you said, emotional quotient, right? And in that intelligence, so that we can connect with people and be able to have that relationship so that you are successful in any kind of profession you choose to go, right? Then the third thing that you talked about was have a hobby, find out that hobby and really be good at it, right? So explore it in detail, uh, then start thinking about how you can explore that more. Once even the lockdown is done or is over, you can start making it more as a daily routine, right? So that's great. So
Yeah.
you talked about connecting with people, you talked about deeply understanding how you can uh, connect with other students, or like let's say other parents, or if you at home itself, like with your parents, with your friends. So how do we connect with people? Like if you can tell more on that, like how do we connect, how do we make ourselves more involved when we are sitting at home, because everybody is on screen, everybody is on smartphone, everybody is like on laptop, doing or watching news or movies, but they are still not connected with the family. So if you can touch upon that aspect, that would really help our audience.
Uh, all right, okay. And towards the end of this, uh, towards the end of answering this question, I'll also touch upon a few personal anecdotes and stories and things that I have actually sort of, as a family, that we have sort of been doing in this past months and past few weeks. So, um, I think the first thing that you need to do to sort of really connect with people is be a little more honest and a little more authentic if possible. So, what happens at times is we usually don't end up saying things that really bother us. So if we can sort of be a little more honest in terms of our connections and relations with our people, with our family, that can actually go a long way. The second thing I would like to touch upon is non-violent communication. And I'll sort of elaborate on that for a little bit, and I'll also give a few examples there. So there is you don't need physical violence to really harm or hurt somebody, do we? So when what we mean by non-violent communication is uh, saying things which expressing ourselves firmly without or by without the intent of hurting the other person. So for example, uh, let's say uh, somebody said something hurtful to me about on the lines of that I'm stupid. Let's say somebody said that I'm stupid, and it really hurt me. Now, what I can try to do is I can try to express my feelings in terms of that. I felt really bad when you said that, and I wish or I want from you to stop saying that. So that is something which is assertive, which is firm, but it's sort of non-violent in its way, rather than saying or getting into a fight with them where we like just swear at each other, and things get escalated very quickly. Now, this is also something assertive communication that is a very interesting thing if you look at it. And if the students want, I can, students or the parents want, I can actually, I'd be happy to share a few more resources on assertive or non-violent communication. The third thing that we can do, and which is actually much more practical, we can do to connect with our families is, I would say, work together. So when you work together, you actually, at times things get really heated, because every individual has a different working style, right? So if you are able to master that, and for example, in our family, with my mother and father, we actually at times end up, sort of, even when we do the dishes, we end up doing those things together, where all three of us are doing something or the other, and working very very closely with one another, which was actually not a very common sight a few weeks ago. So that is something that we are actually able to do, where we work together to do some things, which actually brings us closer. Yes, there will be conflicts. There are bound to be conflicts initially when you do those things, but that's the whole point of doing, sort of working together to overcome those conflicts and build a deeper bond. The last thing that I would like to touch upon over here is, before even connecting to others, try to identify your triggers. So let's say if I am a very angry person, and if I can get angry very easily and say things that I'll regret 5 minutes later, identify those triggers and identify ways where I can actually control my anger and not say those things which I will regret later. So, for example, if I am running late for something, or if let's say it's, I'm talking about my personal example. So when I want to work, and I sort of come to my desk to work, that is the time where I do not want to be disturbed. So if somebody, let's say, asks me for something during that time, that I have identified as one of my triggers. So what I try to do is, like, one of my ways to deal with that is to tell the person that, please, not now, and whatever it is, we can talk about it, or we can look at it later, right? So having such simple strategies after identifying your triggers can actually go a long way to, not where you stop, sort of, from harming or hurting each other, and then going in the cycle of the sorries and I did not mean it, etc. So yeah, that these are my few bits over here.
Great. So if I reiterate and just summarize that, so one, being honest with all your members when you are sitting together or you're talking to them, so that it becomes that you are very natural. Second, you try to do things together, like you said, doing dishes together. You'll have so many different personalities and work styles, so it would help you to work with them, right? It might be as simple as working with your mother, but at the end of the day, even if you are in a profession or if you are in a different environment, a career environment, you still have to work with others, and that's one of the ways to be a team player, right? So that's very important. Then you also touched upon how you can start thinking about not just not to be very aggressive, and finding those trigger points, right? Where you get annoyed or you really want to not touch upon those subjects, or let's say any conversation. So you are very upfront about it to the people who are annoying, that please don't do it, so that those triggers are not activated, and you are kind of very uh, again very positive in that aspect, right? So that's very very important takeaways for us. Just to see, there are some of the questions. uh,
Yes,
so one of
absolutely.
the questions is, like, how do we improve communication skill? like you mentioned, right, when you were in college, and if I had asked you the same thing, like can we do a live session, you would have a little bit shy, right? So how did you overcome that shyness, and how did you learn basic communication skills? If you can give us some practical ways for our audience, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. So, first of all, I think the first step in learning any skill, and which also stands true for communication skills, is that you have to be aware that that is, let's say, that is one of your weaknesses, and you have to uh, value it enough to learn it. So, for example, it was only in my third or fourth year of college when I really realized the importance of speaking well in front of a group of people. Uh, and I think one of the things that made me realize that was that I performed so badly in an interview, and which was actually just in front of my hostel seniors, and not even like, a crowd which is very intimidating. So that was actually when I realized that, okay, this is actually a serious problem and I need to do something about it. So that is the first thing that you need: awareness that, okay, this is an area of improvement for me, and willingness to do something about it, right? So that is the first step. Second thing, I would say, in case of communication, that worked really well for me is that I realized what my strengths are, and I started using them in terms of my communication skills. So two things that you might have realized that I do are, even in this conversation right now, I try to be as natural and authentic as possible, so that and usually I don't use a very sort of word to word script when I speak. So that is something that I realized about myself, that my strength is to sort of really understand a topic and talk about it in a natural manner. Here, one of my other strengths I realized was to sort of be factual in terms of or research based, so to say. So you might have seen me talk about a lot of different concepts, like even assertive communication or emotional intelligence, etc. So whenever I talk, I make sure that I have something important to say, so that people would want to listen to me and sort of not just cast me aside as and not pay attention to what I'm saying. So that is those were my strengths that I identified when I was sort of starting to learn how to improve my communication skills. And all the other aspects of communication skills that they talk about, they hold true. For example, uh, you must practice as much as you can. So in order to practice, I actually started teaching at one of these coaching classes, where I would have to get up on the sort of, and wear the teaching hat and speak in front of 30 children. So that is actually those are some of the things that I started to do when I knew I really should be practicing these skills as well. Even I started actually talking in terms of professional, or in classrooms as well. So I would give my opinion in groups where, when I had something nice to say, which otherwise I probably would not have said before. The last thing that I would like to touch upon, is that whenever you do something that is out of your comfort zone, and initially when I started speaking, I clearly remember it was actually in one of these classes with 200 people, and it was a group project that we were working on. And we were, I think, if I remember correctly, we were in the middle of a model United Nations debate. And I did not have to speak because there were a lot of people in my group, and we were representing Spain, if I'm not wrong. And but uh, had a point. I had a few points in my mind, and I just took the microphone and I started speaking. And that was the first time that I spoke without stammering. And so many of my friends came up to me later and said to me that, wow, like, we've never heard you speak like that ever before. That, you did not do etc. So, uh, whenever you learn something new, it will give you that anxiety. It will give you those butterflies in your stomach. But that's a part of the process. The practice, the struggle, the challenge, all of it is a part of the process which actually makes you better and stronger in that particular skill. And so, yeah, again, that's my bit about how I sort of overcame my fear and became a little better at communication.
Yeah, those are really nice points to remember, right? Like, first you need to find your weaknesses. You need to then start thinking about your strengths, start practicing, right? And as you and me, both of us are in the same space of assessments, right? Where you assess students, you really start to understand about yourself. Once you start understanding about yourself, you are more in a better position where you start thinking about how to apply your strengths, start coming out of your comfort zone, and then again work on your weaknesses so that you start making yourself more and more uh, like impactful, or like you said, right, at the end of anxiousness and that preparation, you'll be victorious, right? So you need to think about that, keep yourself motivated in that entire process, and people will appreciate you. Take that appreciation as a point, right? And keep on working on these small things which will keep you motivated. So that's great, Smriti. I think we had a lot of good discussion here, and really great to get connected with you. So last point which we really wanted to touch upon was your suggestions for career naksha. And as you already know, we have our own psychometric test. We provide career guidance to students. How can we be more effective in giving these kind of counseling sessions like we did today? And how can we be more effective in terms of company making a difference at the ground level like you are doing? So if you can help us in guiding us and giving us suggestion, that would be great.
Sure. So, I would like to say that, like, what you're doing in terms of career counseling is actually really, really important, because what happens is, after we sort of come to this transition junction after school, uh, most of us, we don't even know like what our options are and where should we go from there. So it's very, very important to do that. I think one area that we sort of, as a society need to work upon is, uh, we tend to bucket and put things just in two categories, that it's either medicine or engineering, right? So that is something which we can sort of work upon, and we can actually help people realize that it's a very, very complex world we live in, and there are so many professions out there that we have not even heard about. So that sort of awareness, and like, if you are talking about this being uncertain times, like, life in general is uncertain. We never know where we are going to end up, even after we choose a stream, and let's say even after we choose our first job or second job, etc. Because, like, surveys say that a person an average person will actually switch his or her job, career rather, uh, at an average of 6 times in their lifetime. So if we can actually also make people like slightly more aware about these aspects, and help them give a slight direction and a direction to their professional lives, rather than having them obsess over making the right decision, when they are 15, which is not fair. So that actually would be like great from and that is actually something that you can do, in the space that you're in.
Definitely. Definitely. So I think what you are hinting on is there are so many other professions which are even more prominent, or you are not even aware of, apart from medicine and engineering, which is like the usual thing, and then exploring them, giving suggestions which are really out of the box, offbeat careers, modern careers, new age careers, right? And like you said, this whole world is so complex that there are so many different problems to solve. There are so many different areas to work upon. So not just think about one or two professions, but giving them a slight direction towards you can do something else, and it's a long journey, and you tend to change your path, right? It's not a fixed path. It's not a very that okay, counselor or career naksha suggested you this, but you have to stick to that. It's like a very fluid way of building your career, right? And thinking very out of the box how you can keep on building your strengths, work on your weaknesses, and really think about exploring new and new things and grabbing that opportunity. Great. Thank you so much, Smriti, for your time today. Thank you for expressing so many different options and how to improve as a individual, how to be at home, be sane, be mindful, manage time, do good things, utilize time, and so many suggestions for our viewers today. Great talking to you. Hope
Thank you
that
so
you
much.
also enjoyed, and we will take a break for now. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Nimesh.